All right, we're doing this again. I know. You thought that last time was just going to be a one-time event fueled by alcohol and boredom. Well, guess what? I have plenty of alcohol and boredom to go around. Speaking of alcohol, by the way, this is the Apocalyptic Games Cast. That's right. I floated 2 titles in the last podcast, used neither of them, and went with a much more generic, boring title. Welcome to the artistic fucking process. Tonight's podcast is brought to you by Miller High Life. It's the champagne of beers. Let's do this. So what I thought I would do tonight is read a bit of the Prometheus timeline. Let people get a sense of the setting, a little taste for it. Now, I want to make a disclaimer before I begin. I know that when last you heard the sound of my voice, I declared this a politics-free zone. There are political events expressed in this timeline. It's a timeline that begins in the year 2017, the far-flung future of 2017. And so there are things happening in this that might seem vaguely familiar to you if you're aware of what's going on in the world. And if you are aware of what's going on in the world, I apologize. So here's the important thing to remember as we go through the events of this timeline. None of the political events that are contained in this timeline can be taken as an accurate portrayal of my political views. It's a game setting, and so it's not what I would like to see happen to the world. It's not what I think is going to happen to the world. It's a setup that I thought would make an interesting environment for players to adventure in. Now, it does also devolve into post-apocalyptic territory. I'm sure it shocks the people listening to this that I'm a fan of the post-apocalypse genre. Even if we were to just look at my most recent game, After Zombies, it's a post-apocalypse game. It's probably my favorite gaming genre. Maybe fantasy, maybe science fiction. Probably post-apocalypse. So anyway, here we go. We're going to read probably about 100 years of the timeline. I'll digress and discuss things at various points that I think need to be talked about. But yeah, let's go. Man, Miller High Life is a pretty good beer. I'm just going to say that. I have dabbled in beer snobbery, but as cheap beers go, I'll take Miller. 2017. Most historians believe the Scribe, real name unknown, was born around this year. A high-ranking corporate officer, though not, it is believed, a member of the corporate conclave, his is the only first-hand account for many of the actions taken by the megacorps in the mid-21st century. The Scribe kept an anonymous secret diary stored in the cloud set to publish upon his death. He went to great pains to hide his true identity in case his journals were ever discovered during his lifetime. They weren't, and his identity has never been uncovered, though every academic has a favorite candidate. 2018. Japanese probes land on the Martian surface. These probes add Japan to the growing list of nations that have discovered proof of alien life on the planet. Life which died off only recently during the 20th century. After conferring with other nations aware of this, especially the United States, Japan decides to keep this information secret. 2020. The rights of corporate personhood are firmly entrenched in international law. Corporations have the basic rights of speech, religion, and personal dignity. That they seem to gain these rights as individuals see them diminish in the face of information states that monitor their every move is lost on almost no one, except lawmakers, whose interests align less and less with those they represent. However, Corporations are in constant competition for the best employees, and so they are often the ones fighting on behalf of individual rights and liberties. As a result, those employed by the right corporations begin to move up in social status, even if they are very low-ranking members of the corporation. Pause for drink. 2023. The world enters into a global recession that quickly spreads into a depression. For a variety of reasons, Europe and the Western Hemisphere fare far better than the rest of the world. This prompts the United States, Mexico, and Canada to sell all of their investments around the world to business interests that have moved much of their manufacturing there. Laws are then passed creating a Western Economic Zone, protectionist legislation that essentially cuts the economies of North America off from the rest of the world while removing all border restrictions between the three countries. This is a terrible mistake that crashes not only the economies of North America, but sends the rest of the world spiraling even deeper into economic despair. I tell you what, that shit's a lot easier to write than it is to say. 2025. Set adrift by Western governments, corporations begin merging with the private military contractors that had proliferated in the early 21st century. They use these mercenaries to engage in forced acquisition of companies and resources all around the world. With corporate headquarters in business-friendly nations, a rapid process of acquisition births the first megacorp. Guizhou, L'Avenir, Ligue Yamadini Africaine, La Plantation, Powertronics, and Undersea Explorations. As an aside, these are the major megacorps in the setting. They are all still in existence from this point on in the setting. And so one of the things that you're going to see early in the timeline is that their growth and solidification as beings that will replace nation states. Spoilers, are a thing that the early parts of the timeline spends a lot of time on. Back to the timeline. Guizhou, or the Employer, is a Chinese-based corporation that specializes in manpower. They offer workers, as many as their clients need for as long as they need them, along with managers to keep them in line and working efficiently. The corporation is based in Nanjing. L'Avenir, or the Future, is a French-based corporation that, in spite of its name, is strictly focused on resource development, particularly lumber, coal, and steel. The company is based in Marseille. Ligue Yamadini Africaine, or the African Mining League, is a company devoted to exploiting the mineral resources of Africa as efficiently as possible. The company is based in Kinshasa. La Plantation, or The Plantation, is a South American company devoted to farming, a product that only grows in profitability as the population of Earth spirals upward. The corporation is based in Sao Paulo. Powertronics is a former Canadian company devoted to feeding the power-hungry First World by any means necessary, whether through old resources such as coal or newer methods including solar, wind, tidal, nuclear, and more cutting-edge technologies. Following its expulsion from North America, the corporation is based in Skopje. Undersea Explorations is a former American company devoted to exploiting the seas for food and resources of all type. They scour the ocean floor for oil, while generating tidal and solar power on the open ocean, grow food in the ocean, and build water desalination plants. Following its expulsion from North America, the corporation is based in Port Royal. Pause for drink. 2029. Maverick geneticist Dr. Carl Mueller founds the Mueller Institute for Advanced Genetic Studies in Berlin. According to its founder, the institute enjoys its first breakthrough in this year. While setting up the lab, Mueller's wife goes into labor and their son, Carl Jr., is delivered in one of the institute's labs. 2030. The United States ends all military aid and protection to countries around the world, withdrawing troops and/or funding from Europe, South America, the Middle East, and Japan. These nations are told they are on their own. South Korea and Japan quickly form an alliance and begin expanding it to other nations in Southeast Asia. This group becomes known as the Southeast Asian Prosperity Coalition, usually just called the Coalition. As their economies recover, the nations of the coalition begin heavy investment in expanding their military presence, quickly surpassing what would be considered reasonable for defensive purposes. 2031. On the 30th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers in New York City, dirty bombs are set off in New York, London, Paris, and Berlin. Disagreements over a proper response to these attacks drive a wedge between Britain and Europe, prompting the former's exit from the European Union. Britain then joins the isolationist North American alliance. Reporters begin to call this group the Kingdom States. Though this is meant derisively, over time the citizens of these nations begin to take the term and use it to describe their new political partnership. Britain provides a vital link to European trade cut off in the protectionist fervor of the 2020s, which improves the economic stability of North America while making Britain tremendously wealthy. Another side for those seeking any window into my personal political views. This was written pre-Brexit and pre the most recent American presidential election. Make of that aside what you will. Let's continue. 2035. After a trade deal deemed vital to the multinational interests of the Kingdom States is denied by the European Union, 4 aircraft carrier groups, 3 American and 1 British, are sent into the Mediterranean Sea. When the European Union threatens a complete trade embargo of Britain, the carriers attack. The result is the largest naval engagement since World War II, and the French carrier Charles de Gaulle is sunk. The carriers then engaged in a pitched air battle over Europe, with land-based aircraft from Britain taking part in the battle. When it becomes clear the Kingdom States will win the air battle, Russia declares it will enter the battle on behalf of the European Union to maintain stability. This prompts both the European Union and the Kingdom States to stand down and find a compromise that keeps Russia from meddling in their affairs. The Kingdom States get their trade deal and agreed to offer support should Russia attempt to pressure the European Union while they strengthen their military. Offers to base Kingdom States aircraft in Europe is denied, and despite their economic difficulties, Europe begins its largest expansion in military spending since the Cold War. 2036. Arctic permafrost and methane hydrates melt, accelerating global temperature increase drastically. This accelerates melting of ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica. 2037. Unknown to almost everyone at the time, the first corporate conclave is held. The leaders of the megacorps come up with a plan to buy their way into influence over the increasingly inept governments of the world. Having failed in their attempts to win back seats at the table, the corporate leaders decide they should be the ones running things. 2038. Superstorm Mu, the strongest hurricane ever recorded, strikes Miami. It is believed the entire city is underwater for 9 days following the landfall of the storm. The city is never successfully rebuilt, despite several attempts to do so as sea levels continue to rise. 2040. Money from outside corporations reaches unprecedented levels as politicians around the world seek outside funding and benefits to fuel their political ambitions. Pro-corporate politicians are swept into power in both the European Union and the Kingdom States. These politicians end the disastrous protectionism of earlier decades and bring the corporations back in with less oversight than ever before. Laws concerning monopolies are overturned completely, and politicians are allowed to hold stock and corporate positions while still in office. Schools, roads, and all other infrastructure is turned over to the megacorps, with politicians claiming the savings as a political accomplishment. In return for this public service, most corporate taxes are formally and permanently waived. Friendly politicians also bring back debtor prisons and indentured servitude. Debt is now hereditary and passed on from parents to children, known as life debt. Corporations begin to retreat into well-patrolled compounds where their corporate citizens work and live and where their children attend school. Companies begin to issue their own currency, which employees can only spend in the corporate store. Though most workers grow deeper in debt with each passing generation, few care. The company never calls the debts due unless the worker tries to resign, and life in the corporate enclaves is much better than life anywhere else. Workers who do try to quit, however, are given a stark choice: pay their life debt immediately or go to prison. 2041. La Plantation debuts a new generation of genetically modified crops. They have mastered the ability to engineer plants that grow to maturity in a fraction of the normal time. 2, then 3, and finally 4 harvests can be grown in a single year and in soil normally unsuitable for large-scale farming. La Plantation has been buying poor-quality land for years and began planting large crops immediately. They offer to pay starving locals in food rather than money. 2044. Guju announces they have altered the genetics of animals to grow much faster than normal. Beef and chicken, once increasingly expensive luxuries, begin to come down in price for the first time in decades. 2045. Crime, terrorism, and infrastructure deterioration become a way of life outside the corporate compounds. What few police are not paid for by the megacorps are overwhelmed by the growing anarchy, while corporate security only defends corporate property and employees. 2046. Guju hosts a wildly successful television reality show called Adam and Eve, Quest for the Perfect Man and Woman. The competition takes 3 years to complete, and in the end, Timur Kozlov from Russia and Janu Mehra from India are chosen. The contestants are judged on fitness, reflexes, endurance, perception, and a host of other factors. The winners are given fantastic accommodations at a secret, prestigious Guju compound, where their daily lives and attempts to find love are broadcast to the world. 2048. Guju announces that they have purchased the genetic code and genetic material of Timur and Janu, and that they will be the templates for the ultimate workforce solution, clones. No longer called Adam and Eve, these models are marketed as Joe and Jane, and are perfect for blue-collar work, law enforcement, and military applications. Guju also announces the true key to this new technology. Clones like these could have been made in the past, but Guju have mastered a process of forced growth in animals. The first generation of Joes and Janes will be ready for service in 2055 as full adults, having been given the finest training for their selected professions. As an aside, I know what you're thinking. Why would a Chinese corporation name something Joe and Jane? Well, I'll tell you why. Although I never bother to point this out in the book itself. Maybe I should. Probably save me an email or two. Anyway, I'm actually trying to convey the idea, subtly, that things are becoming a bit more polyglot. As South Park has said, eventually we're all going to jump back in the big pile, genetically speaking. So I alternately use English and other foreign languages when I name things. So for something like this, which is a kind of worldwide product, I went with English. Of course, the other reason is, as an English speaker, Joes and Janes are blue collar, and military is a big part of their usage. If I can talk about the end user of a clone, which I think I fucking can, and so they're Joes and Janes because they're G.I. Joe / G.I. Jane, in a way, right? Or if you're using them for blue-collar work like construction, they would be an average Joe or an average Jane. And so that kind of vernacular is something, again, as a native English speaker, that I can convey in English, and that amuses me in English that I could never do in Chinese. And so even though I decided to represent the entire world, I can't escape the fact that I can't escape the fact that I'm an English speaker. That's what I'm trying to say. 2049. Global sea levels have risen 10 feet. Large coastal populations are forced to move inland, severely disrupting life around the world. Undersea Explorations moves its corporate headquarters to Miami. Though this move is lauded as the first step in rebuilding the city, the reality is that the headquarters is the world's largest and most sophisticated floating city, a much larger and more sophisticated advance on a deep-sea oil platform. The Miami platform can be moved, but serves as Undersea Exploration's headquarters for over 100 years. 2050. World population peaks at 10 billion. Construction is completed on the Washington seawall, the most technologically advanced seawall ever constructed. Made entirely out of stainless steel, it can be raised or lowered depending on the weather, with a maximum height of 20 feet. Karl Mueller III is born in Berlin, Germany. In keeping with what he sees as a family tradition, Karl Mueller Jr. arranges for his son to be delivered in the Institute. Now, I think we're going to stop there. That's 50 years. I know I said 100 years, but this timeline is freaking long. So, as you can probably already tell, things on Earth are going great. The future is bright. Actually, I suppose what you can tell is that the setting is in no way going to resemble our communist utopia that we all know and love as Star Trek. I suppose there are a lot of reasons for that, one of which is that I don't want to be sued by Star Trek slash Paramount slash CBS. Who the hell are they anymore? Of course, the other reason is that I have a different kind of story I want to tell. And as much as I love Star Trek, it's, I wanted to tell a story about independent traders. I like the idea of governments not being on your side. Again, from a game perspective, I like that. From a human being perspective, I kind of wish the government was a little more on our side. Fuck, that sounds political. We're not talking about politics. So the timeline for this setting is actually very long. It's perhaps the single longest part of the book. Join me next time. We will continue our trip through the future of the Prometheus setting. This is Thanksgiving in the United States, so if you celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you had a great one. If you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you had a good Thursday. Thursdays can be rough. Thursday might be my least favorite day. A lot of people in America talk about hump day. I find Wednesdays way easier to deal with than Thursdays, because by Thursday, I'm over it. I really just want the weekend. I want it to show up. I want it with me. So anyway, whether you're having Thanksgiving or Thursday, I hope both went well for you. Have a good night.